Hello and good morning and good evening from wherever you log in. It's such a pleasure having you again at the podcast on the series of accessibility and inclusion, especially in the space of web accessibility, hosted by NABIT India. I have today the head of accessibility, Abhishek Gupta, who reports from Canada from Plato Testing, a leading software testing company based out of Canada. I have the pleasure of also introducing Abhishek, and as we will have him further speaking about the initiatives which he has taken up in the space of accessibility testing specifically. Before we rush into the questions, Abhishek would be great. Thank you so much for joining us for the podcast today. And Abhishek, for the interest of the audience, if you could help with a brief introduction about yourself and also your introduction or exposure in the space of accessibility. Over to you, Abhishek.
Thank you, Arjun. It's a privilege to attend the podcast. I'll introduce myself. I'm Abhishek Gupta. I'm Director of Service Delivery at Plato Tech. Plato is Canada's first majority Indigenous owned software testing and professional service firm. We are on a
Mm-hmm.
mission to break the barrier to bring in Indigenous workforce into IT sector. Build
Okay.
on a long foundation of 25 years of software testing company PQA. We are
Okay.
making sure that our clients are being served better in software testing, and also we have train and employ model where we bring in indigenous
Mm-hmm.
people and train them on software testing courses and guarantee them full-time employment.
Wonderful. It's great to see new initiatives happening in the space of, especially serving towards the indigenous community. And kudos to Lato for taking those initiatives. Abhishek, in the space of accessibility, your views on how it has evolved over the years, and what is the most significant development that you see in the recent times, which you believe is going to be a game changer in order to improve accessibility and also bring its scalability and its availability to the masses? Something around that place.
Yeah, it's a vast topic, but I'm
Yeah, of
passionate
course.
about accessibility, and I'm also heading the Center of Excellence at Plato on
Okay.
accessibility. So definitely we can go deep dive into any topic
Mhm.
on accessibility. We are still having a student mindset. We are learning new and new about accessibility. So let us take about uh, a minute to understand why accessibility and from where it emerged and what's the latest in that. So as we all
Hmm.
know that over the internet, the way we connect around the world is through web, and
Hmm.
web was
Right.
invented by Tim Berners-Lee in 1990 in 1990s. Around 1994, it was being the idea to invent the W3C at
Hmm.
MIT US, and through that there emerged the standard of how the web should be used for people
Right.
with disabilities as well. And since then there has been more standards rolling out as international standards from WCAG 2.0 to
Hmm.
2.1, and latest is 2.2 that got just
Right.
released in 2023. So when we talk about accessibility, I mean the standard knowledge and definition is to make web and digital content accessible to all the people, including people with disabilities. Now, the disabilities could be in any area. It could be auditory related, or vision related, or hearing related. So that's what the accessibility initiatives are, and we Plato Testing are serving our clients in one of the key testing services, which is accessibility testing.
Okay. So, going forward from your experience working with Plato testing, so help me understand this, Abhishek. What are the main factors that are driving the importance of accessibility and adoption of greater adoption of accessibility back in the West? What, according to you, are the drivers of demand, which is making accessibility important?
Great question. What we generally forget about the people with disability as a population, it's not
Hmm.
small. We are talking
Correct.
about over a billion of world population having some degree of disability. And if we talk that in terms of percentage, we are talking about 15% of the world population facing some sort of disability. And this data is coming from WHO. Now, if we think about people with disability having a barrier to access the internet, that is something which is not only concerning, but also the digital innovation would leave a sector of population behind. Now, if we talk about a typical scenario wherein a digital content is not accessible, that means that
Hmm.
people with disabilities will not be able to get engaged with that particular digital content. For an example, this podcast, if this podcast is being released and a person who cannot see and hear, having some sort of disability, either hard of hearing or cannot see it, they will not be able to enjoy the meaningful conversation on accessibility, and so on and so forth for any digital media content. And for that, there are softwares in the market, there are tools in the market, and obviously all are backed by some research. And using these tools in software industry is where IT leaders can make a difference, first
Hmm.
by making an awareness to their uh, fellows and in the company and to their clients that accessibility has to be put on the forefront. And second thing is making maybe some training to their developers and also business and IT decision makers to bring accessibility as one of their project plans. We have seen that a lot of leaders are now thinking about investing into accessibility, not only because it's a requirement anymore. Gone are the days when accessibility was just nice to have. Now it is
Hmm.
mandated by law,
Right.
and it
Right.
is more and more becoming stringent and as part of a project requirement to have accessibility WCAG criteria. And generally it is 2.1 double A standard is what the requirements are coming for most of the IT projects, because no one wants to leave behind people with disabilities, and also they want to abide by their country or provincial or state law to make sure their software is accessible and there are no unnecessary lawsuits or complaints being logged for their software in the market for public.
So, I think what the future holds, and if you can walk me through the possibility of that, why can't accessibility can be drilled into the software lifecycle, and why should it be left for a very later stage? I think if and it's always easier to correct things from the beginning rather than making amends at the end. So, what are your views on how can companies' software development life cycles be amended or edited to have accessibility included from the very beginning into the software life cycle?
Good question again, Arjun. Let's talk about the fundamentals of Plato. Has always been about fundamentals and staying true to what is already proved in the market. If we talk about the software development life cycle, everything starts with requirements for that particular software, and obviously for the end users. What had been always forgotten about the industries who are collecting the requirements
Right.
was people with disabilities
Mm,
expectations on the software, and
right.
that part of requirement comes into the category of non-functional requirements.
Mm,
Generally when the requirements are collected, they are being thought about people who may not have any sort of disability, and
accessibility.
that
Right.
is where the first drop into missing a core piece onto the requirements is already a wrong step being taken into the software development life
Correct.
cycle. And let's
Correct.
say a project can go for years, and halfway through, if there is a mandate or an idea from anyone on the team, or be it an external stakeholder, that hey guys, are you talking about accessibility, are you thinking about accessibility, that is too late in the game. And when
Right.
a late requirement in the game is being
Mm.
put in front of a team, then obviously people are not being able to do their uh, job properly, because they will rush into how to meet those requirements. And rushing into accessibility is never going to achieve the results, because we are thinking about this product that will be used by people with disabilities. Now, the
Right.
idea here in the software development lifecycle is shift left approach. And that
Mm.
approach is not a new approach. Now, from waterfall model to the agile
Mm.
model, and for the audience, because the audience could be IT sound, and the audience
Mm.
could be who may not have the idea about software development life cycle.
Right.
So I would keep it simple. Agile is a way of software development where you have to develop small pieces of software and get it tested by
Mm.
your business people or your stakeholders.
Mm.
Instead of developing the software and making it ready for testing after 6 months, you can pretty
Mm.
much do the same thing, but you are developing in chunks. Now,
Right.
what can happen now and is happening with the industries who have got accessibility experiences? They are bringing in the accessibility requirement right from the start. They
Mm.
are instructing the designers and the BAs that they have to think about WCAG guidelines or international standard from wherever the public base of that particular user base, I should say, of that particular software is going to come. And right from there on, there are requirements. And what means is those requirements are going to be developed. Obviously, if the
Mm.
developers would not have any idea about how to go differently about accessibility requirement, they will learn, they will get themselves
Right.
trained on that. There will be conversations, and obviously the UAT group, which is the public group or the user base group who will test the software
Mm.
before going live, they will also come early in the game and give a thumbs up, or they will file some bugs which are defects in the system before they are gone live. So that particular whole piece of requirement, understanding and accessibility requirement and why it is important, is altogether has not gone to a level where it should ideally go in the IT
Yeah.
market.
No, absolutely. But when you, I say this with, and I think you would agree with me, and I say this with my experience, that in terms of adoption of accessibility across web content, we are still at a very primitive stage. The percentage of content which is accessible out on the internet across countries, I don't particularly cherry pick someone as being the problem creator versus others, and you had the vital position within pivotal within Plato testing of managing web accessibility. Now, what is the major challenges which forbids companies from adopting accessibility, or what are those challenges which acts as impediments, which kind of stone blocks accessibility adoption? If you could throw some light on that, please.
Yeah, I think talking to our clients and also new prospects into who want to make their software accessible,
Hmm.
the major challenge what we have found is that uh, leaders in IT sector and also the
Right.
decision maker who would reserve a budget for accessibility onto their software, be it maintaining the accessibility on their software or having the accessibility has been implemented newly on their software. The lack of awareness is the
Okay.
most important uh, issue which we have
Okay.
found.
Okay.
That is one.
Hmm.
And the branches out from lack of awareness is also a bad assumption that it's going to cost them a lot if they
Right.
think
Right.
about accessibility to be implemented.
Hmm.
Most of the people will get surprised that a lot of resources and
Hmm.
even tools to even develop softwares, even test softwares, are open source. And
Correct.
W3C, World Wide Web Consortium, has already got a lot of proven techniques and trainings and tools available to public on their website. It's just
Okay.
that the first step to understand A, why accessibility, read your
Hmm.
country or your state laws, uh,
Hmm.
understand more about what if I don't implement accessibility today,
Hmm.
could be not only we are opening ourselves for a bad complaint, but also the brand
Right.
value of
Absolutely.
one application towards a competitor or yourself in the market is not adopting to accessibility need. Now,
Hmm.
I think once that awareness about accessibility and also the knowledge about the tools and
Hmm.
reserving a budget onto their project plan, and also hiring the resources who have
Correct.
got accessibility experience on their
Hmm.
resumes, on their experience, is also an idea where we suggest IT leaders to be mindful of. And now, what we have also observed, Arjun, is that IT vendors. Let's say
Right.
if a client would want to get their application developed by an
Hmm.
IT vendor, generally on to their contracts, there are not many clauses in terms of their experience in accessibility or their authoring
Okay.
tool or their software development tool is capable to have some inbuilt accessibility features or not. There are a lot
Okay.
of vendors in the market who have got that idea and ahead into accessibility, but when client is approaching these vendors, they are
Hmm.
still having those traditional way of getting the requirements and contracts signed without even
Okay.
looking at accessibility clauses. So I think if we
Okay.
all, including client and also the vendors, can think a
Hmm.
little bit more about having resources, having tools, having our IT
Hmm.
teams and contributors more trained and aware into accessibility, it's gonna be a day night difference.
Okay. Okay. And there are some. This segment is kind of common, but I intentionally want my guests to give their 2 cents on the subject. What are the popular or the most common myths that you have encountered in the space of that you heard from clients in the space of accessibility? Why are those so it's a myth, of course, but how do you counter them? If you could speak something around that, please.
Yes. So one good suggestion I'm gonna give to you and your audience is that Plato has got a lot of accessibility contents on their website. We
Okay.
have a lot of podcast and blog post which
Mm-hmm.
takes people not only understanding why accessibility, but also like to your question on the myths about accessibility.
Okay.
I can give you the top reasons where
Mm.
accessibility is being not understood the way in terms of coverage
Okay.
from the IT leaders and the
Mm.
clients, wherein accessibility testing coverage can be done in two steps or two ways. One is bringing in some proven scanning tools that
Okay.
you can pretty much plug in into your browsers or to your
Mm.
applications while a person is interacting with the software. The scanning is done dynamically, and through that
Okay.
accessibility scanning, within minutes
Mm.
or even seconds, a report is being generated
Okay.
that will give you an idea about
Mm.
the WCAG bugs and against the different guidelines. And they will also
Mm.
rate the bugs and the defects into AA or AAA for that matter. Uh, what we have
Mm.
seen, which is concerning because it is ongoing still, is that some of the IT
Mm.
leaders and clients and vendors are thinking and even pressing that this is the only coverage they need. If this particular report is being
Okay.
generated well, and if their
Mm.
developers have somehow fixed these bugs, that is what
Mm.
is the coverage about accessibility, and that
Mm.
is only the WCAG standard they have to meet. Uh, Unfortunately, that
Mm.
will take only maximum 25 to 30% of your coverage. That is point A. Point B
Okay.
is there are going to be a lot of false positive bugs that are going to be generated
Mm.
through these scans. Not only that the team can
Okay.
route into a different direction, they can waste their efforts into fixing something which is not an accessibility bug at all.
Not only.
That is the
Okay.
myth,
Okay.
wherein we have heard into a lot of conversations that to our questionnaire, where we are going to ask a client that, are you doing accessibility, and they will be saying
Hmm.
yes. And if we would ask some artifacts, they are going to give this automated report through a scanning tool, which only takes, as I said, 30 to 40% of coverage. What accessibility ideal combination would be to have these scans. Yes,
Hmm.
that should be the first step, which will give you a low hanging fruit of, let's say, color contrast issue, or some
Hmm.
images,
Hmm.
graphic images, which do not have an alternate text.
Hmm.
They are going to give those low hanging fruits in terms of observations. But you need to bring in an accessibility SME or an experienced QA or an auditor
Hmm.
to now test it through some manual testing techniques.
Right.
That is the combination. If not done well, an
Hmm.
application unfortunately will never be accessibility ready for people with
Right.
disabilities.
And I think just to add to what you said, there is always a need for a native tester, somebody who's also a person with disability themselves, to access and give their go ahead on whether or not it is failing on accessibility, because eventually what happens is that many a times when we do not have a native tester, many assumptions which may fall false, um, if assumed at the time of at the time of testing, may lead to a potential problem in the future, which could have best been factored had there been a person with disability himself or herself who had tested in the very first place. So I think that's also something which is really important to add to.
Yeah, and I'll add to this, and cannot agree more, Arjun.
Hmm.
Thanks for bringing it up. Again, going back to the fundamentals of SDLC life cycle, where it ends is your UAT, user acceptance
Right,
testing.
right,
If that
right.
is not done right, or if that is not done with the right user group, your
Hmm.
software can still fail in production. And for
Absolutely,
accessibility, the UAT group is people with disabilities. That is
absolutely.
another area, or a myth, going back to your earlier question, wherein
Hmm.
even if everyone, people with no disabilities, have
Hmm.
done the testing or the development onto the softwares, obviously following the tools and the guidelines, but the real 360-degree coverage of testing
Hmm.
is when you bring in people with disability to do the delta test, not the full-fledged test, but the delta test of, yes, if they would be the end user of this application, how
Hmm.
are they going to interact with the application, which is going to be essentially, let's say, go live next week or next month.
Absolutely. No, I that's where I think where we have a commonality, and I think that's highly emphasized by both of us, the importance of having that in place. Um, Leading to the next question, Abhishek, when for what happens at times is that versus just meeting compliance versus being truly inclusive in the development of the product. Often people limit to a checkbox being ticked that accessibility has been maintained, while maybe in the intrinsic or the truest sense, the accessibility into the product is not stitched to the fullest. What are your comments, and have you? What do you feel about this statement, and how can that be addressed?
Yes, Arjun. I think this is a little bit of, I think, as a human contribution also, how we should be thinking about accessibility. Uh,
Hmm.
Good that there are laws and there are uh,
Correct.
legislations around the world which are making it as a mandatory requirement to think through and discuss. But
Hmm.
as humans, the intent should be uh, to make sure we break the barriers of the digital content not going into the hands of people with disabilities. And as
Hmm.
I mentioned, that the awareness of accessibilities and even the tools to develop and test accessibilities are being made so many
Hmm.
free of access. So I
Hmm.
think should all have a shared responsibility and mission by default, to make people aware,
Correct.
contribute in any capacity for that matter, to have accessibility being discussed within the company, outside the company. And that if we start doing, I think other than not only making a mandate being compliant towards our software, we will also directly or indirectly gonna contribute to making a difference in the lives of people with disabilities.
And I think that is the truest sense of inclusion, because eventually, when you have the heart and the intent at the right place, I think that's where proactively, without or with the responsibility of compliance, when companies adopt accessibility with the right intent, I think that's something for the future to look forward to, because I think that's where, apart from the business advantages of having a huge segment of customers who have till date been denied the access to those products, it also reflects the responsibility. It reflects the commitment towards diversity that the companies hold, and I think that amplifies the concern which the companies have, and it brings tangibility to their relation with the disability sector. Um, that's something which I think most organizations should deep delve into and look into, in order to make themselves truly inclusive. What advice do you have for organizations looking to establish or enhance their accessibility testing process for the future? Some 2 cents to that, please, Abhishek.
Right. So, Arjun, yeah, a little bit of advice is going to be backing from some of the responses from our questions. But I think first is going to be training.
Hmm.
And I'll give you an example of how we did at Plato. Now, the reason of Center of Excellence was twofold. One is
Hmm.
obviously going to be helping our clients achieve their accessibility testing needs. Another one was more of awareness within the company as what is accessibility. Uh,
Okay.
Center of Excellence, we certify internal certification onto
Hmm.
having a beginner's knowledge of what is accessibility, what are the laws, what are the tools in the market, how the software should be developed.
Hmm.
Just doing those awareness sessions within the company is where we have seen a lot of difference into not only helping our clients with a little bit of more trained testers, but also now we can talk freely within among ourselves as colleagues and employees about
Hmm.
this idea of accessibility, which otherwise had not been shared across the company in this way. So, going back to the organizations, I think my first advice would be to have some sort of training and awareness sessions. That should be step number one. There are tons of free resources over the internet, YouTube, uh, DQ University, Web AIM,
Hmm.
Wave Tool, and Google Light. So there are tons of tools, and obviously W3C, wherein we can start small. The whole mindset is start small.
Hmm.
Have maybe an accessibility group set up within the company who can talk about some beginners and fundamentals knowledge of accessibility. I think if that would
Okay.
start is when there are going to be discussion around why the requirement is not there on accessibility. We can talk about the accessibility lingos.
Right.
So that is the advice, I think, my first key advice to the organizations. And then obviously understanding the laws, what is WCAG and which WCAG is applicable onto their provinces and states or countries, and how they
Hmm.
can be ready for something which could be otherwise very concerning, to not have their applications and softwares ready for accessibility.
So, futuristically speaking, what is the role of accessibility testing? And let's say there's a huge audience amongst people who watch this podcast, not only of companies, but also of those talents who are entering the space of accessibility. Um, what would be your message for them? Or what would be the future of accessibility that you think we should strive towards or work towards? That would be the last parting question to you, Abhishek.
Thank you, Arjun. I firmly believe that
Yeah.
accessibility testing is going to gain multifold momentum uh,
Okay.
around the globe. And
Okay.
if QAs, or for that matter, any IT or non IT person can think their career to be developed into accessibility QA, uh, it's going to be a solid career path for them. And again, it's going to be
Mm,
purposeful path also for them, because they can contribute directly as a social impact and diversity and inclusion. uh, all the tools, or
mm,
most of the key tools, are open source.
mm.
WCAG
Okay.
guidelines and examples are there on W3C. One thing which,
Mm,
and lately Gartner has also released a report on accessibility, which also gives an idea that artificial intelligence and machine learning is also going
mm.
to be part of accessibility testing in the coming years,
Okay.
where these scannings or dynamic scans of the applications, where a lot of false positives are there currently, and also the
Mm,
coverage is only 30 to 40%, is
mm.
also going to increased by multifold. Uh,
Okay.
but if QAs and also UAT groups can get their understanding and their skills enhanced
Mm,
into accessibility area, I think
mm,
they can shape up their career in a
mm.
much more better way than now. People can adopt to accessibility QA as their
Mm.
career, is what my recommendation would be. And there are very
Okay.
nice certification. IAAP is
Mm,
one of the certification in the market, which is already a trusted certification, but I think will give you a great idea about how it can be done and what are the values. Lot of clients and industries are in great need of accessibility QA in the market.
And can these jobs roles, and I ask this question for maybe that part of the audience who might not be as fortunate to migrate to Canada like you have been, can these jobs be done remotely given the right training and the certifications? Is that also a possibility? And I think second thing, that's for a future talk, but something food for thought, that while I was speaking to you, if you could also share your journey, how from India you migrated to the Canada and started working there. I think that's for a separate podcast. But yeah, more specifically to whether or not these work roles can be done remotely, uh, given the hesitation for people to leave their hometowns or states.
Yeah, Arjun, I think accessibility should be treated as one non-functional type of testing or development for that matter, or business requirement gathering for that matter. And since IT world uh, is being supported onshore, offshore, so as accessibility testing, uh, accessibility developers and designers and QAs can pretty much do their job from any part of the world. Uh,
Okay.
I have seen a lot of clients where accessibility centers are
Hmm.
based out of, let's say, India or near shore. There is no issue I can see why accessibility cannot be done remote
Remotely.
from the
Okay.
comfort of your own city or country. Uh,
Right.
yeah, no issues about that. Now, if we talk about my journey,
Hmm.
yes, I started as an associate with L&T Group in Mumbai,
Okay.
and
Okay.
after that I moved to Pune, and from there I got a client requirement to New York. And since
Okay.
then it's been more than 15 years I'm out of India. Not that I don't go to India. I
Okay.
lately made a visit last month to India.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, it's always back to roots feeling when
Right.
I see India growing, and more
Hmm.
and more people getting into IT domains.
Right.
Yeah, I think I invite and encourage
Hmm.
IT crowd into start thinking about accessibility. One difference which I can see back then and even now into development companies and IT companies, where still I don't think we intentionally train our testers and
Accessibility test.
developers and BAs
Hmm.
into accessibility. That is going to
Hmm.
change for sure. IT leaders and
Yeah.
companies who are going to be ahead into this thought process uh, can have the bigger slice into the coverage and winning projects, and
Hmm.
obviously making a benchmark, and obviously gonna be indirectly and directly contributing into a social cause
The
as well.
first experience. Absolutely. And with that hope and wishing you a very happy Dashera. We are into the week of Dashera. And as the victory of good over evil and light over darkness, may there be a future which will bring more light and bring more accessibility in the dark lives of persons with disabilities through initiatives towards a more accessible future. And with that hope and with that commitment, I would want to thank you so much, Abhishek, for sparing your time and sharing your valuable insights and knowledge on the subject of accessibility. It was such a pleasure hosting you, Abhishek. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Arjun, to you and all the audience. Happy Dashera, and
Ji.
we'll be in touch. And obviously, this is the glad that we got connected with you and your company. And
Right.
we'll be doing much more podcast and awareness sessions so that make we together can make a difference in the world.
Hopefully. Cheers to that and Godspeed. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you, Arjun. Bye.